We believe we have a mandate to bring godly change to our nation and the world through the 7 spheres or mountains of influence. Welcome to the Truth and Liberty broadcast, brought to you by 7M Ventures and Andrew Wommack Ministries.
Well, hello and welcome to our Tuesday night Truth and Liberty live broadcast. We've got Richard Harris here with us and Karen Conrad, and I'm Andrew Wommack, and we do this every Monday night. I've been doing it for a long time now, and we welcome all of you from all over the world. Tonight we've got 2 guests with us from, I think it's Fairfax, Virginia, is that correct? And we are going to be talking about the abortion issue. We've got some things coming up that could radically change the whole situation, and there's some great news, some good news, and I'd encourage you to stay tuned. But before we get into our guests and introduce them, I'm going to turn it over to Karen Conrad, because we have some giveaways, we have ways that you can participate, and you can actually send in your questions, and we'll answer as many as we possibly can towards the end of the broadcast. So this is Karen Conrad.
Thank you, Andrew. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Truth and Liberty. It's going to be a great broadcast, and we're so glad that you joined us tonight. As Andrew said, please send this to your friends, family, let people know about this, because we're going into a very critical time with the Roe versus Wade, and I want to let you know how to engage and tell you about a few things that we offer you every week. So first of all, if you have a question, we would love to hear from you, and if you're watching on social media, you just have to put that question right there in the chat section, and we'll go ahead and have a whole team of people standing by, and they'll send those questions over. Also, I do want to let you know, unfortunately, we have had some censorship on social media, and so if you want to make sure that you can watch us without interruption and have access to all the materials that we'll be talking about, watch us at truthandliberty.net. And if you're watching us on there, you go ahead and enter your question into the comment section, the chat section, and we would love to hear from you. Also, we've got a group of people standing by. If you need prayer or anything that we are talking about tonight, if you've got questions, call our phone center at 719-635-1111. And I just want to mention, when we do these programs, Andrew, usually we have people that have gone through an abortion that are watching. And we want to encourage you, if that is the case with you, or if you know of somebody, please call for prayer. God loves you, and we just want to help you if that's the situation. Also, if you want to receive updates on Truth and Liberty and to be eligible for our giveaway, subscribe at truthandliberty.net. We've got a brand new website, don't we, Richard?
We do. It's excellent.
It is excellent. And Richard, you worked really hard with our team to make sure and get that just the way we wanted it, including a news feed.
Yeah, we now have a news feed where we
Yes.
pull from a number of trusted sources, and it's updates periodically every hour or so, and so you can one-stop shop at truthandliberty.net and get all stay up to date on current events.
Yes, including your blogs, which are awesome.
And we also link with a lot of other organizations
We
that
do.
talk about voting and the records of people. I mean, it's really, we're trying to become a one-stop shop, but we aren't doing it all ourselves. We link to these other websites.
We do. We really do. It's about unity. And so anyway, so check that out, truthandliberty.net. And if you subscribe, you'll be eligible to win a prize. And we want to congratulate last week's winner is Carol Burkett. And you won the Living in the Balance of Grace and Faith by Andrew. And tonight we are giving away Every Day with Jesus devotional. This is an awesome devotional. And so, Andrew, have you signed that already?
I don't think so. I will sign it.
Get Andrew to sign it, and it's very easy to win. You just subscribe, and we'll draw a person from that list. Also, we have so much going on here at Andrew Wommack Ministries and Charis Bible College, and I want to mention just a couple of them to you. If you want to watch the archives, all the previous programs are out there on truthandliberty.net. You can search by topic or by speaker. Also, we've got gospeltruth.tv, which is our 24/7 internet channel. I'll tell you what, some of the best teachers are on that channel. They're friends of Andrew Wommack himself.
Including Karen Conrad.
It's
She's
true.
on there. I think that's the reason she thinks they're the best.
Well, I don't know about that, but
Really good.
it's really
You know,
a
something
great
else I
program.
need to say. I said this on last Tuesday night's live Bible study, but we need to let everybody know that Karen is now engaged and is going to get married. Got a beautiful ring here. So for all of you guys who were thinking you had a chance. You blew it.
It didn't move quick enough.
That's it.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. I'm very happy. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
And then we have got the men's advance coming up March 14th through the 16th with James Brown and Tony Dungy. So you'll want to register for that quickly. I think we could pack out for that one. It's going to be awesome.
So.
Charis Bible College Campus Days in Woodland Park, April 3rd through the 5th. And David, King of Jerusalem, April 12th through the 13th. So get out here and join us for some of those special events.
So, you know, on Tuesday, I believe it is, it's the 22nd of January, is the 46th anniversary, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, of the Roe versus Wade decision. And, of course, the figures on how many children have been aborted in the U.S. since that time are somewhat rough because, you know, California, New York don't record all of them, but there's well over 60 million lives that have been snuffed out since that's happened. And I tell you, it's a tragedy, but Richard was just sharing with me today that worldwide there was something like 42 million abortions just in 2018.
It was the greatest cause of death.
The leading cause of death in the
That
world.
is terrible. I tell you, this is a blight on us. And of course, many of you watching this grew up in this. You inherited it. I know in 73, man, I got touched by the Lord in 68, and I didn't watch television or listen to news for over 10 years. I don't even remember it happening. I was just so into the Lord, I didn't know what was going on. But nonetheless, while we've been out doing our own thing, there's been tragedy happening. So tonight we are really blessed to have with us Steve Antosh, let me know if I pronounce this incorrectly, and Mark Elsasser. And they are both with the Pro-Life Alliance. And welcome. We are glad to have you on our Truth and Liberty broadcast.
It's good to be with you, Andrew. Appreciate the invitation.
And I think that you're from Fairfax, Virginia. Is that correct?
That's right. I'm from Oklahoma, but we're here in Fairfax. That's correct.
Oh, you're from Oklahoma. You know, the people in Oklahoma used to throw dynamite at us in Texas across the Red River. And then we'd light it and throw it back. But we are glad to have you with us. And Steve, let's just start with you. I know that you have been involved in political things, I think, since the 70s or something. But give us just a little bit, quick background about how you got involved in all of this and where you came from.
Well, I guess my first memories of political things were helping my dad put Barry Goldwater signs on rural fence posts in Oklahoma in 1964.
Wow.
But what really got me involved was Ronald Reagan, and first working on his primary campaign in 1976. He didn't get the nomination then. And then finally, in 1980, was also a delegate to the convention, served as his national youth director, organizing students. And this is something I still to this day we look for and try to encourage young people. If you want to get involved in politics, a good way to start is work on a campaign. And it's a tremendous experience and opens all kinds of doors for really having an impact on public policy in this country.
So how long have you been involved with National Pro-Life Alliance?
Well, we started the organization in 1994. I came back, I'd been teaching overseas and came back, always felt that there was a need for an organization to really hold politicians accountable for the ultimate question of when does life begin, and not just settle for minor regulations on abortion. So we started the Pro-Life Alliance. Now this will be our 25th anniversary, and the Lord has continued to prosper it and grow it every year till we've now reached about 700,000 members and over another million activists who collaborate with us.
That's awesome.
That's impressive.
Well, Steve, forgive me for my ignorance here, but the way you're talking, did you start the National Pro-Life Alliance?
I was one of a team of 3 people that we had this vision. I came back from Guatemala and where I was teaching at a university there. And one of the things that really bothered me, we adopted 2 precious children from birth while we lived there. And I often thought about what would have happened to these children had Guatemala at that time had the same abortion laws that this country does. So for me, this issue is personal.
Yep. And Mark, give us a little bit of your background. I think you've been with Pro-Life Alliance since, 2009, but how did you get started?
Since 2013.
Oh, excuse me, okay.
Oh, that's fine. So Steve shared his earliest political memories. Mine, you might get a kick out of this. I'm from Louisiana originally. Mm-hmm. I was driving back from church camp in, I guess it would have been 2004, 2005. My pastor's driving the van, and he's listening to talk radio, and I heard something about Republicans and Democrats. And so I asked my pastor, what's the difference between Republicans and Democrats? And he, half joking, said, well, one of them's got morals and the other one don't.
That's pretty clear about it.
Yeah, that's bottom line.
Yeah, that's close. So from the moment I turned 18, I got interested in politics. I was old enough to vote. My mom was in the Air Force, and she sort of instilled the values of voting in me. And so I wanted to know everything there was to know about the candidates. And then I just really got into studying everything. I helped co-found College Republicans at Louisiana Tech University, where I graduated from in 2011. And then in 2013, I drove to Washington, D.C. I really wanted to do something and make a positive contribution for the conservative movement. And so I came to Washington, D.C. And got a little place and paid for 3 months of rent and started looking for political jobs in the conservative movement. And about 2 months in, the National Pro-Life Alliance called. And so I started there at the very bottom, and soon thereafter became working on the Hill, building support for the Life at Conception Act. And so I've been here ever since and just absolutely love it.
Well, we want to thank you all for what you do. Again, I'm fairly familiar with your ministry because I get your newsletter, and it's one of those that I read every time. And one of the things that I read, I think it was just last year that this became news to me, is I thought that Roe versus Wade just legalized abortion on demand. And that's not completely accurate. Plus, the thing that I learned through your newsletter was about the way Roe versus Wade was written. It had kind of you can explain this in detail, but they had something like a clause in there that if you could prove life began at conception, well, then that person would have the same constitutional rights as any other person. Mm-hmm. So that was brand new to me, and I would like you to expand on that because I know that a lot of people watching this tonight would not understand what I'm saying, and I certainly didn't say it technically correct. So would you please comment on that?
Sure. Well, Andrew, understanding Roe v. Wade is critical to understanding how do we make abortion eventually illegal and protect the life of the unborn. Because before Roe v. Wade, you had laws in virtually all the states prohibiting abortion, and in one stroke, the Supreme Court invented a federal judicial protection of abortion on demand for any reason at any stage of the pregnancy. And the way they did this is they drew on an earlier case in which the court had invented, in the case of contraception, they invented a case, a so-called right to privacy, which doesn't appear anywhere in the Constitution. And they expanded that to say, well, this right to privacy, we are going to use it to also extend to a woman's right to abort for any reason. But they recognized at the same time they had a problem. To do that, they said, well, science really has different opinions on when life begins, and we're not scientific experts, and so we don't know when life begins. And so that's why we're going to use our created right to privacy. But there was an admission in the Roe v. Wade case itself. It said, however, if at any given point it can be established when life begins, now not just scientifically, but legally, then of course, they said under the 14th Amendment, which says that no person can be deprived of life without due process of law, then if legally the unborn baby is a person, then of course, they said, it would have to be protected.
Now, see, that was what was brand new to me because I did not know this. And I think, again, you're the expert on this, so you correct me, but I think that when in 73 there wasn't much scientific evidence because nobody had questioned it.
Yeah.
But since that time, I think that now science is totally on the side of life at conception.
Well, there's always been plenty of evidence which the court ignored, but you're correct that the body of evidence has grown through technology that has been invented, the whole ultrasound technology. We can see things, and now even lay people know clearly that this is a life, and advances in genetics. There was never a strong case for saying this was not a life, but now there is virtually no case.
Well, man, that is awesome. So we've had some decisions, like in Ohio, about, was that called the heartbeat bill?
Yeah, which Governor Kasich vetoed, I believe.
But it's headed for the Supreme or the appellate courts, and it could make its way to the Supreme Court.
Well, yeah, there are heartbeat bills, and I'm sure that they can elaborate on this. That hopefully will make it up to the Supreme Court. But if my understanding is correct, Ohio's bill didn't actually become law because of the governor's veto. But yeah, I think there's prospects, aren't there, for some of these bills that have gotten passed by the state legislatures to make it up to the Supreme Court in this term.
So, Mark, do you have information on that? Could you fill us in?
Sure thing. I know that Iowa, the governor of Iowa did sign a heartbeat bill this past year, and I'm sure that the court struck it down immediately. So that could make its way on to the Supreme Court soon. But states have been passing any number of laws all over the place. Ultrasound laws, parental notification laws, these dismemberment abortion bans, late-term abortion bans. The states are passing all kinds of great pieces of pro-life legislation, but they get struck down for any reason. These appellate judges will strike them down, and that's all, of course, because of Roe v. Wade. Like Steve was saying, Roe v. Wade has basically taken away from states the right to do anything, even the slightest thing. Recently, the Supreme Court didn't even let Texas enforce a law on some basic clinic regulations. The Supreme Court struck that down when Anthony Kennedy was still on the court. So that's why we really need something like a Life at Conception Act to overturn Roe v. Wade. Until Roe v. Wade is gone, there's very, very little that the states can do. But sending cases like ultrasound bills and heartbeat bills to the Supreme Court is one way to help challenge Roe v. Wade.
And so the government hasn't been just neutral in this thing. If I'm correct again, I think it was under Nixon that they started funding Planned Parenthood, and the 2017 or 18 appropriations bill had something like $475 million that they subsidized Planned Parenthood with. Is that correct?
That's right. They get about $500 million every year in funding from taxpayers.
And so the government is actually promoting this. And again, you guys could give the details on this, but just recently, Obama, he funded a lot of abortion worldwide and encouraged it. That was cut back, I think, when Trump came on. But the new House is wanting to push through, again, funding for abortion overseas.
Yeah, overseas, that's right.
So we're exporting this all around the world.
That's right. Through the UN, through certain funds set up by the UN, we are in fact funding abortion providers overseas. Ronald Reagan put a policy in place called the Mexico City policy to stop that from happening. Clinton took it away. George W. Bush put it back. Barack Obama took it away again, so to continue the funding. And then Trump has reinstituted the Mexico City policy. And you're right, the Democrats even tried to write a write-around of the Mexico City policy into their latest bill to open the government. This budget bill that they've come up with.
So the battle still rages, but there are some good things happening. So I know that y'all are sponsoring, or you're definitely supporting some legislation about life at conception. Could you tell us about this going through Congress?
Right. Well, the Life at Conception Act has long existed. In fact, shortly after Roe v. Wade, it was the concept was originally created and introduced by Senator Jesse Helms and Congressman Henry Hyde. Hyde is well known among pro-lifers because we speak of the Hyde Amendment, which is the amendment to the appropriations that supposedly doesn't allow taxpayer funding of abortion, but it has a huge loophole. But in any case, this bill has existed for a long time. Even the Republican Party platform promotes the use of defining the word person under the Constitution as a way of ending the reign of Roe v. Wade. But for many, many years, no one had seriously taken up this approach. And shortly after the Pro-Life Alliance was founded, one of the reasons for our existence is we felt uncomfortable with merely trying to regulate abortion. If all we're doing as a movement is trying to make abortion safer by safety regulations, well, that's not much progress. And whether or not we can actually win this year, we felt it was more important to fight for something and give people a vision of what could end Roe v. Wade. And the Life at Conception Act is the best approach because it actually uses the Supreme Court's own language, as we said. So we took this up in the late 90s, and the support in Congress has grown steadily over the last 10 years for this bill.
And I read in your newsletter just this last week that actually you gained ground, even though we lost seats in the House, that there are now more people wanting to co-sponsor this and get on board than you had before.
That's awesome.
There are more pledged co-sponsors. One of the things we do is during election years, we send surveys to all the candidates asking them about 10 different specific proposals, such as parental notification and ultrasound. But the most important question to us is the Life at Conception Act. And that's the best time to ask politicians, because it probably doesn't surprise you that candidates are more interested in what pro-lifers think when they're running for re-election. And so we have, as a result of that candidate survey and notifying our members and the grassroots lobbying they did, that we have more pledged co-sponsors. Now we are in the process of turning those into a reality.
So do you have any concept of how many of those people who've made the pledge would actually stand and vote for that if it made it to the floor?
Well, in past years, the vast majority of them do. Some of them get there and then change their mind and aren't sure, and then it takes grassroots pressure where we share the candidates' answers with our members. And this is another thing that is the focus of our organization. Many pro-life organizations focus on education, which is great. We need to educate people. But the principal problem with politicians is not that they're not educated about it. It's really we go into offices all the time and we talk to them about explaining things that I just explained to you about the Life at Conception Act. But you know what really makes the difference? It's when we reach into our cases and pull out pile after pile of petitions signed by voters from their district. Suddenly they're a lot more interested. And that's what we try to do.
Well, that's surprising that they would be more moved by voters than they were by principle.
Shocking, isn't it?
It's kind of what a politician is known for, sad to say. That's a shame, but praise God that you guys are doing this.
That's right.
So do you actually have the votes to push through the Life at Conception Act, or how far short are we? Where do we stand in this process?
At the moment, if it actually came to a vote, we don't have the votes in the House. We would have in the last session, as you know, the House of Representatives changed hands, even though we have more activist members, co-sponsors behind the bill. And in the Senate, it could potentially get a majority, but really the biggest roadblock to the bill has always been the Senate, because it's not enough to have a majority. You have to get 60 votes to overcome a Senate filibuster. So there's a good chance the House can change back into more pro-life hands next time, but we still have a fair amount of building to do in the United States Senate, even though after the last election, people talked about how the House changed and the discouraging part of that. But the most important thing to us was we made new progress in the Senate. There were 4 blatantly pro-life or pro-abortion senators that were just outright defeated, and 2 additional Senate pledged co-sponsors who were elected.
Praise God. That's
It's
awesome.
awesome.
So let me just say to the people that are watching here that, this is the reason that these elections are so important. And I was disappointed over the midterm elections when you look at how many Republicans resigned and what the tradition has been. We really didn't do as badly as it may look like, but nonetheless, we need to gain ground. It's just wrong that this should be continuing on. So your vote counts. And not only in the 2020 election, but even these off-year elections, we've got people like Steve and Mark and all of these senators and congressmen and women that are trying to get some things through, and we just are outgunned at the moment. We need to stand up. And let me make this one other statement before we get back to you two guys. But I heard Kenneth Copeland on election night of 2018 saying that if you vote for a person who supports abortion, that you are an accessory to murder. I'd never heard it stated that way, and I know that that is very offensive to some people. We love people that have had abortions. I know many people, and I don't reject you, but I believe that that is a true statement. And this is something that you cannot be passive on. If you claim to be a Christian, the Bible is very clear on this issue. How would you guys, Mark, how would you respond to somebody saying that a person that supports people who vote for abortion are accessory to murder?
Well, like you said, a lot of people have made some mistakes, and the Lord is forgiving of that sort of thing. And we respond to those people with mercy and with kindness, because, a lot of these women who've gone through this sort of thing have been lied to by the abortion lobby, by the media. It's just tissue. It's just a clump of cells. Right. This is not even an unborn. This is not a life. It's not a baby yet. The heart's not even beating. They lie to them because they know there's a financial stake to be had in the abortion. That's why one of the most important laws that we do push for at the state and the federal level are ultrasound bills to ensure that mothers are shown ultrasounds of their unborn baby before they can decide whether or not to have an abortion. Because when they see that life inside that the ultrasound can show them, then they understand that this is not a clump of cells, this is not just tissue, that this is a life, and they can reconsider what they're going to do. So in many ways, I see the women as victims of the abortion lobby and of the media and all of these lies. And yes, abortion is killing. Abortion is the taking of an innocent life. But there's sympathy to be had for people who are just being downright lied to, and we can do things to show them the truth.
Well, I agree with you. I believe totally in the grace of God and in forgiveness, and I even have some videos out about people that used to use abortion as birth control, and they're now friends of mine, and we promote them. So I'm all into God loving people and forgiving them, but I don't think it's healthy to minimize the act and somehow or another make them feel better that way. I mean, it is killing a life. And I've taught from Scripture, that's not our purpose here tonight, but I can show you from the Bible that life begins at conception through multiple Scriptures. So I think people need to recognize this is murder, and yes, God loves you and God will forgive you, but man, it's got to stop.
But to tell them the truth of that, they're being lied to that it's tissue. So how much more do we need to get out there and speak the truth of really what's happening with that abortion?
Amen.
Right.
So, Steve, let me ask you this. If the Life Conception Act makes it through or something else, and if Roe versus Wade was to come to the grips that life does begin at conception, what would happen? Would that just automatically throw open the door to abortion being illegal, or what would happen if that was overturned?
A very good question. Depends who you listen to as to what the result of that would be. If reading the shrill things that come from the NARAL, the National Abortion Rights Action League, or Planned Parenthood, they are constantly talking to their people that once Roe v. Wade is overturned, then contraception will become illegal, and that's ridiculous. What Roe v. Wade did was to protect abortion on demand for any reason for the full 9 months of pregnancy. So overturning Roe v. Wade would simply have the effect of once again allowing elected officials to deal with abortion as they saw fit. And in fact, there are a dozen or so states that have laws, their laws against abortion, that they never repealed or changed, that were in effect at the time that Roe versus Wade was handed down. In those states, abortion would become immediately illegal. But abortion, not contraception, that's a whole different issue, as I think most people realize. And another handful of states have what are called trigger laws that said if the court overturns Roe, then at that point abortion will be illegal in our state. But the truth of the matter is, in most of the country, when Roe is overturned, that is really just the beginning of the battle for us to then actually save lives. Because at that point, we actually have to pass laws that would save lives in all these other states.
That's interesting. And I know that...
Can I ask you, would it be possible or conceivable for the Supreme Court to actually go the full distance and hold that the unborn child has a constitutional right to life? It seems to me that if they reach that result, that could, in one fell swoop, take away the power of the states to even allow abortion. What say you on that?
Is it possible? Yes, but highly unlikely. Because the people the justices that we are relying on to overturn Roe v. Wade are they believe in judicial restraint. They are highly unlikely, for example, to take a law that regulates abortion clinics and health and safety, and then say, oh, using this state law, therefore Roe v. Wade was entirely incorrectly decided, and we're going to overturn the whole thing. Highly unlikely that would happen. That's why it's so important to send them a bill like the Life at Conception Act that would give them the bigger issue and use their own language to deal with the problem. But are they likely to then even go further than what the law was at the time of Roe v. Wade? I don't see it.
I agree with you, Steve, on that. It also kind of highlights the importance of electing pro-life state senators and state legislators, because if Roe is overturned, then the ball is going to be squarely back in the court of the state legislatures, and we need pro-life people there too.
That's absolutely correct.
And so, Mark, let me ask you this. What is your opinion on Judge Kavanaugh? Do you have a feel how he would vote if something like this was to make it to the Supreme Court, some of these heartbeat bills, things like that?
It's hard to say how any of these justices will vote. One of the things that they get touted for being are originalists. And Steve had mentioned the judicial restraint. And one thing is clear: if you're a true originalist, there is no right to an abortion in the United States Constitution. So any originalist, I would think would want to, see that there is no right to an abortion in the U.S. Constitution. As Steve said, sending them a Life at Conception Act gives them something to uphold, to say that, this is using the language of the precedent of Roe v. Wade. It's squarely within the wheelhouse of Congress to protect what it means to be a person by the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. And so if you send a Life at Conception Act to a court full of originalist judges, you're giving them a reason to stand, for just what the Constitution actually says, regardless of what their personal views are on abortion.
Well, the confirmation hearings on Brett Kavanaugh were a fiasco, and I mean, it was an embarrassment to me the way things went. And it looks like that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, is in failing health, although she's recovering from this last thing, but she's in her later 80s, I believe. Yeah. So there's a very good chance that Trump could even appoint another Supreme Court justice nominee before his term is up. What do you think would happen? I think one of the reasons, whether it was stated or not, they saw the handwriting on the wall for the abortion bills and stuff like this. What do you think would happen if they got another conservative? What would the confirmation hearing be like? Would it be worse, or are we over that?
It's certainly hard to imagine it being worse than what they did to Judge Kavanaugh, but you have to imagine that, in the case of replacing Scalia with Justice Gorsuch, we were replacing a conservative with a conservative, or an originalist with an originalist. With Kennedy, again, a Republican appointed justice with a Republican appointed justice. But to actually gain the ground of having a ostensibly 6-3 originalist Supreme Court or conservative Supreme Court would trigger a fight like I don't think we've ever seen before in American politics.
I had some people say that, man, we'd go back into a civil war, and they were saying some of the terrible, our nation has gone so far in one direction that to pull it back would be a civil war. And I was discussing that with somebody, and they said, and this was a new thought, they said, but wasn't the Civil War worth it to free the slavery?
Great point.
And I would hate to think of the nation becoming more divisive, but right is right. And we have had 9 people wearing long robes push things through that the American public as a whole has not been for. And it's emboldened the left. And regardless of what the consequences are, I think we need to fight for doing the right thing, especially with this issue of abortion.
That's right.
That's right.
Absolutely.
A lot at stake.
Well, we're down to where we could take some questions now. If y'all are up to this, our audience sometimes asks some pretty hard questions. So we'll put you on the spot.
They've got some good ones here. So I'm going to go ahead and start out with Tony Boserman, who sends in the question. He says, someone posted on Twitter the other day that Planned Parenthood got $500 million taxpayer dollars and then donated almost $50 million to support pro-choice congressional candidates in the 2018 midterms. Is there any way that we can stop that process?
Yes, there absolutely is. And first of all, they didn't give money to pro-choice candidates. They gave them to pro-abortion candidates. And
did we say that wrong?
Well, pro-choice, they call themselves choice, but you're right. Yes. What you're saying is that, look, let's call this what it is, a spade a spade.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's very good.
But yes, there is a way to stop it. And although as a movement, we have made some progress in defunding abortionists, it's been limited for this reason. So far, things such as the Hyde Amendment, which is good, and the defunding of grants to abortion clinics that Trump has done through regulation are really all fine. But the biggest amount of money that goes to abortionists is through Medicaid. Right. And the Hyde Amendment, all it does is says that no dollars that the government gives through Medicaid can be used for an abortion. Well, there's a big loophole to that. I think anyone who's an accountant can see is that the Planned Parenthood says, oh, well, this dollar we got wasn't used for an abortion. It just went to pay for our rent, our utilities, for the salaries of the abortion doctor. But the actual cost of a particular abortion, we didn't use Medicaid money on that. So the approach, what needs to be done is a super Hyde Amendment, a bill that we have recently drafted and are now talking with our friends on the Hill about introducing a bill to say that no organization who provides abortions can receive any taxpayer dollars, and that would shut off their money.
That's awesome.
Oh, that is awesome.
I just heard that this week that there was one of the main abortionists that lobbies for that in a response to a question said, yes, our main purpose is abortion.
the CEO of
my
Planned
goodness.
Parenthood.
Is that who it
Yeah,
was?
she in our materials this week. There's an article on it
Oh.
where she said our core mission is abortion.
That's it.
Wow.
Which kind of, wow, it was an incredible admission because for years now they've been saying, oh, don't cut off our funding because we provide women's health care.
Yes.
And well, what do? Well, mammograms and pregnancy tests and whatnot. But
90-something% of what they do is
Yeah,
all abortion.
it's all a ruse. And yeah, that was
And
a big
also,
admission though.
I'm sure that either Mark or Steve could answer this better than I could, but I've heard that there were only like 600 or something like that Planned Parenthoods in the entire nation, but there are thousands of women's health clinics
Yes.
that provide the exact same services without abortion. So this thing that women are going to somehow or another be without contraception, be without women's services is a total ruse.
True.
That's right.
That's good. Okay, this question is very interesting. I had not heard about this, but the viewer is saying, can you give us insight into New York Andrew Cuomo's bill allowing abortions up to birth, making it a fundamental right and making pro-life a crime?
Yeah, so I mean, you see a lot of states starting to do that now that they sort of fear that we're getting closer and closer to overturning Roe v. Wade. Some of these states like New York, Delaware did it last year. Actually, a bill was introduced even in New Mexico to do this, to enshrine abortion in their constitution and to codify Roe v. Wade, so that in the event that Roe v. Wade is overturned, abortion will still be protected in those states. And so you're seeing some movement from states like New York and from people like Cuomo to do that sort of thing.
Well, the last half of that question talked about making pro-life illegal. How could they do that? How could they? I don't understand that. Is there any clarification
what's
on
happening?
that, Mark?
If it's what California tried to do in recent years, which was force pro-life ministries and pregnancy centers to recommend abortions,
Oh, yeah.
or to straight up put them out of business, the Supreme Court has struck down things like that in the past. So this is possibly just posturing for a presidential run on Andrew Cuomo's part.
My goodness, on the platform.
to put everything he can think of and throw the kitchen sink at pro-lifers. And he said before, a few years ago, he said pro-lifers are not welcome in New York. He's
Wow.
made this crusade against pro-life a big part of his governorship.
Shocking.
Man, I wouldn't let the door hit me as I left that place.
That
Yeah.
is so
Yeah.
true.
He's extreme.
That
We got a
is
question for
shocking.
Steve here.
Yeah, so here is one that's, this is a good one. Media makes it sound like the majority of millennials support abortion, but Students for Life found that only 7% shared the position of the Democratic Party platform. Abortion without any exceptions and funded by tax dollars is what they're talking about. Mark, can you give us, or Steve, perspective on this issue, since I think one of you is a millennial?
Sure. I think that, my generation is moving more in the pro-life direction than previous generations have. I've mentioned a couple of times the life-saving power of ultrasounds. When people, go and see that this is a baby on the inside, not only does that show them that this is a life, they will then go and post that on social media. It goes all around their Facebook, their Twitter, their Instagram. You can see ultrasound pictures all over the place. You can see gender reveal parties, to see if you pop the blue balloon and see if it's a boy, or pink if it's a girl, or, things like that. And a lot of these things are being passed around on social media where a lot of young people are spending a lot of time. And, I don't think they buy into it. And one of the things you're going to see this week at the March for Life, of course, most of the major news networks are not going to report on this, sadly, but the March for Life is almost nothing but young people, a flood of young people there from, high school age and college age students there, chanting things like, hey, hey, ho, ho, Roe v. Wade has got to go. All these clever chants, holding up signs that they've made themselves or signs that they've had produced. And besides that point, the Democrat Party's position on abortion on demand is so radical that, I'm not surprised that only 7% of young people believe that abortion should be available for any reason up until the moment of live birth and taxpayer funded like the Democrats believe. I don't think any generation has a majority of support for that radical position, and yet here we are. And that just shows you, to your point earlier, the importance of voting your conscience. People go out there and vote. Don't vote for candidates who support abortion on demand up until the moment of live birth at taxpayer expense.
You mentioned the second time here about the sonograms and the impact that's having. If I'm correct, you said something. What's the percentage of people who see the sonogram and recognize it's alive? What percentage of people that view that does it cause to keep the child?
Right. So a nationwide study by pregnancy centers in the last couple of years has come up with 78% of abortion-minded women who saw an ultrasound of the unborn child before they went to have an abortion decided to choose life. They changed their mind and they did not have the abortion. So up to 78%. Some numbers have shown it higher, but that's a pretty reliable study. It's a big nationwide study of, I think, about 10,000 women.
Is that at any stage of the pregnancy that stat applies, or?
I think it was just in general, but most abortions take place early on in the pregnancy. Right. So I would assume that the broad number of that is early on, and it's just going to look more and more like a baby the later on it gets.
Right.
But all of the pregnancy centers that I've helped start, they all use sonograms, and I've heard the exact same stat. And Focus on the Family, when James Dobson was there, they bought sonograms for all of the pregnancy centers that I'm associated with. I don't know if they did it nationwide, but it is a very, very effective tool. And it's really ignorance. And I think, the Scripture talks about in 1 Peter chapter 3, it says, this they willingly are ignorant of. Yeah. And I think there is a lot of willing ignorance because it's convenient. People don't want the burden of bringing up a child. They don't want to have to curtail their sexual activity and become responsible and get married and have a husband. And they willingly are ignorant of this. Again, I'm not malicious towards them, but I'm saying the truth is out there if people were willing to pursue it.
Oh, for sure.
That's true.
I want to tag on to that, Andrew. I think, so one of these bills, these pieces of legislation like you're talking about, is the ultrasound legislation, has been struck down by some courts. And it's like, the liberals on everything else, they stand for disclosure and, all these mandatory rules and all these things. But boy, when it comes to abortion, no, shut that door. We don't want anybody peeking behind there and seeing that this is a baby. It's like it really, more than any other of these bills, reveals how, in my judgment, wicked the intent of the advocates for this practice are. It's a bad thing.
Do you know if only 7% of millennials agree with the platform, why are we not seeing a stronger turnout of millennials towards conservative and pro-life candidates?
That's a good question for Steve.
Yes.
Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, a big part of the problem is how the question is framed. Because actually, if you poll people on, do you think Roe v. Wade should be maintained, there probably is a majority who would say, yes, they don't favor overturning Roe v. Wade. But if you ask further, that's because they don't understand what it does.
Heard that too.
They think they hear so much on the media that Roe v. Wade just has something to do with women's health and maybe even contraception or whatever. So the way that as pro-lifers, we understand what Roe v. Wade does, but in our communications with the public to build support, what we need to talk about is abortion on demand. And that's where people do agree with us. Do you think that the law should protect abortion on demand for any reason during the full 9 months of pregnancy? And people will say, of course not. And then also hold candidates accountable to that. That's why many candidates get away with allowing this regime of abortion on demand to continue, because they can get away with just saying, oh, I'm pro-life in some sort of vague sense. Right. That is a political role that the Life at Conception Act plays, is now when they're faced with this question, they actually have to take political responsibility for do you want to allow the protection of abortion on demand for any reason?
I agree that that's absolutely right. But I have had some Christians come to me and say, but if we were to overturn this and make abortion illegal, well, then what about women who their life is in danger? They couldn't end the pregnancy because, you know, it might kill the life of that child, or they'll bring up the situation about rape. And my personal opinion is it doesn't matter if it is rape. That's a terrible situation, and I understand it's bad, but that's not justification for killing an innocent child that didn't have anything to do with it. And again, my understanding is that all of these extreme cases are less than 1/2 of 1%. That's right. It's like 30 to 40-something% of all abortions are nothing but it's just inconvenient. I'm not ready. This would cramp my lifestyle, and on it goes. Yeah.
That's
so
good.
we need more education, and that's exactly what Pro-Life Alliance is doing. And you guys give out your website. We're drawing close to the end of this, and I want to make sure, I know we've had it up on the screen a couple of times, but tell people how they could get involved. I think you said you have over 700,000 people now that are cooperating somehow or another, a part of this. What can they do to help you?
Well, the best thing anybody can do is to go on to prolifealliance.com and sign that petition. Steve had mentioned earlier that, and I've seen it firsthand, when you go to the Hill and you just see some guy, you know, in a suit talking to you about a pro-life bill that you've never heard of before, you know, that doesn't pique their interest. But when you bust out the briefcase and start unloading petitions from hundreds and thousands of their voters back in their home state and in their district, they get the idea that this is not just something that a few people want them to do, that there are a lot of pro-lifers back home who are paying attention to what they're doing, and they expect them to keep their word and co-sponsor this piece of legislation, the Life at Conception Act, and to vote pro-life. And when they know that there are people out there that are paying attention to what they're doing, politicians are self-interested and interested in being reelected, they're going to pay attention. They're going to stand out. So adding your name to our petitions, we continue to deliver those petitions to Capitol Hill on a rolling basis. And that's really one of the best things that you can do.
That's great.
So how do they get your newsletter? Like, I'm not even sure how we got it. I'm sure we've given to you, maybe is how we got it. How would they get your information? Because I get a lot of good information out of your newsletter.
Well, since the Pro-Life Alliance doesn't receive any taxpayer funding, we rely on the voluntary contributions of our members to keep this going. So if people are able, we would love to have you join with a contribution in any amount, and that will allow us to send you not only newsletters but action updates. For example, if there's a difference in the opinions of candidates in a primary in your area, or things that may affect you, then this would give your viewers the chance to actually become involved with specific information that would allow them to put the heat on their elected officials.
Okay, so they can go to prolifealliance.com and they can contribute, they can sign up, they can sign this petition, and we'll also put a link on our Truth and Liberty over there so that we can go directly to you. And let me just say that if there's some way that Truth and Liberty can coordinate with you or associate with you and help in any way, please let us know, because that's what we're out to do. And we don't have to do it all ourselves. You're already out there doing this for 25 years. Praise God.
It's great.
I think we got time for maybe one last question.
Okay, this is a tough one, but it's a good question. This is from Mark, who is a guest on probably truthandliberty.net, and he says, how can we prove scientifically that life begins at conception?
Well, from the moment of conception, what we know and what we've learned since Roe v. Wade more and more about is that there is a unique set of DNA formed at the moment of conception that belongs to neither the mother nor the father. A specific genetic code of DNA that comes into existence at that moment that has never existed before and will never exist again. And that DNA contains all of the information of if you were to decode it and unravel it, it would fill the world with data about your eye color and what your blood type is going to be and what your hair type is going to be and what kind of diseases you might be susceptible to. The DNA that is the essence, that contains the essence of a lot of what you are biologically speaking, is all there from the moment of conception. It belongs to neither the mother or the father, and that's never going to happen again. You are uniquely you from the moment of conception. And we learn more and more about that every day. So that's
so
what
they have their own heartbeat. They have, in the Bible, I'm more familiar with the Bible than I am science, but John the Baptist leapt in his mother's womb at 6 months into the pregnancy and was filled with the Holy Spirit. And I can guarantee you the Holy Spirit didn't fill a hunk of flesh.
Right.
It was a person.
Right.
And in Psalms 139, it talks about, I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and it says, all of my days were written in God's book before there were any of them. So God had a plan for every person. These 60 million plus children that have been aborted in the U.S., God knew every one of them, had a purpose for their life. The 42 million that were aborted worldwide last year, God had a purpose for every single one of them. And who knows what kind of, science and musician and all of these things that the world is missing because of these lives that have been snuffed out.
Yeah.
They often talk about a woman's right. I think they ought to talk about the female children's right.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Absolutely.
So we're just about out of time. We got maybe a minute and a half. You got a short question or?
Yeah, this is just really a quick question, and I guess it's about judges. Like, what can we do about judges that are obviously going against what the Constitution says? That might be a good one for you, Richard.
Well, they need to be replaced. So how do you replace a judge? In the federal system, a judge can be replaced only by impeachment or if he or she retires or passes away. So the U.S. Constitution says that judges serve for terms of good behavior. And many times people will say, oh, it's for life, but it's not really life, it's good behavior.
We're
so
just
it's up to Congress to take care of it.
Just about out of time on this, sorry. But also remember that 90-something% of all of the appeals are handled at the appellate level, not the Supreme Court.
Yep.
And we can deal with that.
That's so good.
So Steve and Mark, thank you very much for being with us. I think that this has really touched a lot of people. I encourage you to go to prolifealliance.com and you can contribute to their ministry and help them. You can sign up for their newsletter. You can sign this petition, which is very important. And remember to join us again every Monday night for our Truth and Liberty live cast. We're going to have on guests every single time, and we're going to be taking the Bible and applying it to our society and encouraging you to get involved. God bless you. Thank you for being with us.
Join us next time for the Truth and Liberty broadcast. Find tonight's episode and related articles and links at truthandliberty.net.